who you are.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, so my name is Catherine McNulty. I currently live in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I did not grow up wanting to be a grief coach. I think when all of us who stumble into grief, that's exactly how it happens. We stumble in it to ourselves, and then find a need to want to help others. So my story starts way back when I wanted to get pregnant for the first time. I had pretty much the fairy tale life that's the American dream that we all talk about. I didn't have a white picket fence, but I could have. So I had been in the corporate space for a long time. I had a successful career. I had found a husband, and the only thing that I really felt like I needed to complete my life was to have a child. And I didn't know that that was going to be a challenge. So my first experience with grief was a miscarriage early on. And then when I went to get pregnant again, I was doing really well. I had passed sort of the first trimester, which they all say if you can just get past this first trimester, like things are golden. You're sort of out of the miscarriage stage. And so I got to 27 weeks and went into preterm labor. And so I had my son, Jackson Robert, about 3 months too early. He lived for 42 days in the NICU, fighting for his life. We were told every minute that he essentially could die, but we never really believed that, right? The doctors will tell you that, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. There was no scenario that I could think of where he wasn't going to survive, where he wasn't going to live. He had brain surgery, and after that, things started to go downhill. He had experienced a severe pulmonary hemorrhage that had basically done things to his brain that were not recoverable.
Mm.
And once we got to a point where we could image his brain, where he was old enough and we could see what was going on, the doctors told me that he wasn't going to live. And
Wow.
so I had a choice to let nature take his course or in life support. And so as I was trying to make this difficult decision, something happened that sort of pushed me in the right direction. So one of the things about premature infants is that they want to still be in the womb. So they want it to be dark. They want it to be quiet. They don't want you to touch them. They don't want lots of bright lights. And so he had an experience where he was obviously hooked up to a lot of machines, ventilators, heart rate monitors, and things. And one time, all of the alarms went off,
Mm.
and I was pushed out of the room by the doctors. There were 12 doctors that came in, and they were all touching him. All of the lights were turned on. It was the exact opposite of what I told my son, what was good for my son, right? But they were keeping him alive, and they did resuscitate him. But that was the point where I was just like, I can't let this happen, right? Because I needed to be with him as his mother. So that helped me with the ending of life support. But what we did was we did it sort of on our terms at night when it was quiet, when it was dark. There was soft music. I was holding him. It was really, it was very much a spiritual experience because what was really unique for me during this, you think that this would be an excruciatingly painful experience, right? They basically, he was on a ventilator, so they removed the ventilator
Mm.
and then we kind of waited. And what was really unique about it was that during that time, and it was about 7 hours that I was holding him, there was no pain. There was no sadness. There were no tears. It was only love.
Mm.
And I thought that that was, I look at that as maybe God holding me up because I then left the hospital after that, after I handed him to a nurse after he had passed. She said, "Can I love on him?" I will be forever grateful to the nurse who was there to help get us through all of this. They're amazing. NICU nurses are a breed of their own. But I left the hospital, and when I left the hospital doors and got outside, is when my world came crashing down and
Mm.
when I felt all of that pain. And that's when my grief journey then started.
Yeah. Yeah. It's It's amazing that you were able to hold things together because that is a difficult scene that you just painted for me and the listeners. But you were finding peace along the way. And you keyed in on something. You said that was the love that was being shared, right? And I always state that even beyond death, there's basically two things that I can think of that surpasses that, or I guess is beyond the grave, so to speak. And it's love and relationship, right? You'll
Yes.
forever be a mother to this son, right? You said
Hmm.
Jackson Robert, is that right?
Jackson Robert. Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you'll forever be his mother, right? So relationship does extend beyond the grave. And obviously, the love that you have for him has not only, it didn't just show up in that moment, it showed up beyond and even now as you're pushing into some areas of helping others with grief. I don't want to go there just yet, but I just want to show that, wow, your love really is showing still. How long ago has that been?
No, it was 14 years ago. And I like the phrase, as you were saying that, right? We grieve deeply because we love deeply, right? And there's a correlation there, right? So that's something that I always say, like, of course, your grief is that difficult because you love them quite so much. Yeah. So it's been 14 years. And I would argue that the love that I have for my son has only grown
Mm,
and become even stronger during those 14 years. And maybe that's because of what I do now and because of my healing. But yeah, it's pretty incredible.
yeah, when you talk about, we when we love deeply, we grieve deeply. You think about going into, I don't know, a labyrinth, so to speak, and it's like no matter how far in you go, it's almost like you have to get back out the same path. And um, with grief, it could be similar because it's however long it took you to get in there. Um, will be probably as long as it takes you to get out, so to speak. And we know that we never get out, right? But it's a journey that just keeps on, and so the deeper the crevice, I guess, the deeper the hurt, the grief, and the experience.
I have an analogy that I use that sometimes is helpful in thinking about the grief experience, especially for somebody who maybe hasn't been through it. But it's almost like when you learn of your loss or you experience the loss, sometimes it's sudden, sometimes it's not. It's almost like coming home and going into your house and having everything in your house turned upside down.
Hmm.
Some things are broken, some things are beyond repair, some things are still okay, they're still there, and you have to figure out, am I going to live with my house like this or am I going to do something about it? And I think that that's very much what grief can feel like because your world can be turned upside down and you have to figure out, what am I going to do about this? Right. And I think that as you look at your house and you say, okay, well, what are the things that are really important to me? I want to keep those, right? So you keep the love, you keep the memories, you don't erase them, they're still there. But then there's some things, well, I have to throw these away because now they're broken. They're not serving me anymore. And sometimes you have to bring in some new things. And I think that, the work that I do with people has very much to do with that we have to rebuild, and it's that rebuilding of the house and looking at it as understanding the environment that we live in is actually what's going to help us. So you're not replacing anything, you're taking what you already have, you're rearranging it, you're adding some new things to it, and then you become a new person in that space. But I think because you've done that there's a lot of meaning and there's a lot of purpose. And you can step back and say, well, I did this.
Yeah, you kind of keyed in on something that my brain was going to, and it's that, in to keep with this analogy, you don't have to put things back where they were before. You can paint the walls, right? You can do different things, move the furniture. And the reason I state that is sometimes after especially trauma or a loss, which is the equivalent of trauma in a lot of cases, most cases probably it's good to make things different, right? There's a lot of people that I think cling to. uh, permanence, but we know that the only thing that's permanent is change. So,
Exactly.
so we have to kind of push into that a little bit, and I think I use this example with my clients. If I always state, if you came in here and rearranged this room while I was out of the room, I'm going to be highly upset when I get back here. Like it's going to really work on me because I had no control. And of course, control's a facade anyway. But if you walk out of this room and I rearrange everything, take pictures down, rearrange them, do whatever, I'm more comfortable because I have a portion of that control, right? You may be uncomfortable when you come back in, but guess what? This is my space, right? I can do what I want with this. So I feel like we all feel when we have a portion of control that I don't know, it just makes us feel a little bit better about a situation. So I feel like in grief, if somebody has some of that control, um, and of course, it may not be right off the bat when you lose someone either, right? It's these things take time. And by no means am I telling you that, week one of losing someone that you should rearrange your home or your finances or whatever. I'm not stating that. But I think when you step out in that type of faith that I can do this for me, I think it's going to be better than if somebody else comes in and wrecks your home, right?
I agree. Well, and again, a lot of times we don't have control over the loss. We don't have control that our room has been, turned upside down. But what we do have the ability to do, and I think this is where it's, the analogy is different for every person, is to look around your room and look around your life and say, what are the things that are the hardest, or what are the things that are bothering me the most? And let's fix that. Let's start there. Let's look at that. And it may even be, people take different amounts of time to grieve and work through things. And some of my clients can go very, very quickly if they choose to. But you can go at your own pace. But yeah, you pick the thing that's sort of most in your face, so to speak, the thing that bothers you the most, work on that, and then go to what's next. And I think it's an ever evolving way of being.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. Like I said, there's not much in this world that we have control over. Control is very much an illusion. So I think the more I give up control, the happier that I feel. I tell most people that there's really two things in the Western world that we can really control, right? What we put on our bodies and what we put in our bodies, and it's not just drugs, alcohol, food, that type of intake, but it's also medias that we consume, right? If somebody hates this podcast, they can turn it off right now and go to a different podcast. That is an exercise of control, so to speak. But I don't know. There's just not much in this world, and especially when it comes to life and death. And you saw both very quickly within the life of Jackson Robert, right?
Yeah, and one thing I would like to say, however, is so much about control or about grief is uncontrollable. But I have 10, what I consider my business name is Grief Inspired, because I believe that grief has inspired me. I have 10 grief inspired mantras, and one of them is you have more control than you think you do.
Mm,
So, as much out of controlness as exists in the grief process, it's being able to look at it and saying, okay, given that, what can I control?
hmm
Right? I can choose to educate myself on grief. I can choose to be in a supportive community. I can choose to learn and grow myself. Those are the things that you can control, right? You can control, do I keep my belongings of my loved one? Do I let them go? Right? These are the things, there are things that you can control. And it's what we try to do is focus on those ones, and realize that there are things that we absolutely cannot control. We cannot bring them back. We can't control how they passed away a lot of times, right? We can't control sometimes our emotions and how we're feeling about it. Although I would argue that you can in time if you do the work, because grief is work. But yeah, so focusing on what you can sometimes move us in the right direction.
Well, one of the words you're using there over and over is choose, right? Life is a series of choices. Every choice that you have made throughout life landed you in this chair in front of me today, right? Um, I didn't have to get on TikTok and find you. I didn't have to do a lot of things. Now, there are some choices that are made for us. And like you and I were discussing before we punched record, most of us in the grief world found our way here through some kind of traumatic loss. Somebody important passed away that kind of drove us to get to this point. I was dipping my toes in the grief world early on in my internship, and I'm like, oh, I like this. I like seeing this. I guess, drastic change between even the life and death thoughts of a person, right? That, oh my gosh, they come in and they're so broken. And then by giving them hope, giving them new dreams, things of this nature, you see life spring forward from this person who felt nothing. And I look at it as that was my, just getting in the shallow end of the pool. But very shortly thereafter, one of my friends passed away, and it absolutely changed the trajectory of where I'm at today. Um, it's I keep going deeper and deeper into grief, but I think it's because of him that I really, really pushed into this specialty, right? In Tennessee, I don't have to have any certifications whatsoever. Some states you do, like to have a specialty here or there, especially when it comes to things like EMDR, things of that nature. Here in Tennessee, you don't. It's more of a feather in your cap type of thing. But I choose, right? I choose to, I guess, dig deeper into grief. Love it. And it's because of the change that I see in people. The change of just really seeing someone who has no hope find new meaning in life, meaning and purpose. And I think that's what we're all after, and maybe a lot of what we lose whenever someone does die.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what a lot of people are like, well, how can you hang out with people who are grieving all day? Like, aren't you depressed? Isn't that sad? And for me, it's exactly what you're saying. It's not about sitting in the pain and really, we can choose to be a victim to our grief. And I think everybody has the right to do that, right? I had a therapist tell me once, you lost a child. If you want to go running naked down the middle of the street, you can do that. Like, you have the right to do that. But I think that there comes a time when people come and they look for podcasts, or they look for my YouTube channel, or they look for things. And what that tells me is they want something different, that
Mm.
they're looking for hope, and helping someone find that hope and get to a place where they are okay with their grief, where they have a life that they didn't expect, where they're happy again, right? On my webpage, right? Yes, you can be happy again, right? That is a main purpose of what I do. And that for me is what's really fulfilling, is inspiring people to do that work, to get to the place where, yes, I feel like I've healed. I'm accepted my loss. I'm okay with it. I've brought it and embraced it and brought it into my future. And I'm a better person because of it.
Yeah. Now, currently, I'm only licensed in Tennessee. They're getting ready to come up with something called the Counseling Compact that opens up a lot of states for counseling. So I've never used this platform as a way to drum up business, so to speak. It is just more of a passion, and this is really a hobby for me, the podcast. But I had a gentleman come on very early in the podcast. I can't even remember. It was probably within the first 10, 15 episodes. And I asked him before he came on, I said, have you ever thought about going to counseling? And he's like, no, I really don't want to do that at all. And we spent an hour together, and it was a really good podcast. And I would say about a week later, he said, you know what? You've changed my mind. I want to go to counseling. And it's like, that is so awesome, because he came on literally just wanting to tell the story of losing his spouse. And, within an hour conversation of just simply being present with him, I think he felt heard. He felt appreciated. I hope that I gave him a little bit of hope, and that pushed him into another choice, right? That I like the feeling of this. I want to go further. So I feel like there's a lot of people out there, maybe people that listen to the podcast or people that come to your YouTube channel that are seeking further help. And I always tell people that come on, this is not therapy, right? Even if it's they have no professional work out in the grief world, this is just two people talking. But I encourage everyone to find a therapist, somebody who's impartial, somebody who has, you're not taking them home with you every night. They have no stake in your personal day-to-day life, but within four walls, they can provide you with direction, with hope, with new vision. And I really feel like no matter who you've lost in life, that's really what we have to do is recreate our vision. Our life doesn't stop when somebody dies, right?
No. No, it doesn't. And it's interesting because I am 100% pro therapy. I think the world would be a much better place if we were all had to be in therapy. But like all things, there's good and there's not so good. And I think that just having someone that you can speak with, like going through the process and not just going into a room or getting on a Zoom. It's not about just sitting down and going, fix me,
Mm.
right? Because I remember I did that myself, right? I was like, just fix me. And so what I like is when a desire to move forward and to have concrete goals as part of your own therapy, right? Because you can make that. You can walk in and you can say, well, this is what I would like. Because I think sometimes people can get stuck in sort of the continual talk and talk and talk, and then you kind of can get stuck. So one of my taglines is move forward, right? So to always
Mm.
have, whether it be with a therapist or a coach or anybody that you're talking to, have this sense in mind, like I'm moving myself forward, I'm learning more, I'm growing more. I combine grief education. I think talk therapy has a lot of help in that, right? And then I also throw in, I douse it with a bunch of personal development training. And again, with that emphasis on moving forward. And so, yes. And so having that hope and wanting something different for yourself, and you being the one who's choosing and in control, as opposed to just leaving it up to someone else to fix you, so to speak, I think is a good way to go.
Yeah, Catherine, and you're talking about people thinking they need to be fixed. And I try to make people understand that they're not truly broken. There's parts of us that may feel broken. Um, but overall, I don't know. I'm not huge on the term fixed, right? Um, but I do think there's parts of us that can change or be challenged, and I think that's what we need. And again, I think a renewed vision. You think about any two lives that are intertwined with each other. When one of those portions cease to exist. And this is even outside of death, right? We
Mhm.
can talk relationships like divorce. How many friends have you had that just passed through in a moment of time? When a portion of that relationship no longer exists, we have to have that new vision. How do I live without this person? Of course, this podcast is mostly about physical loss, but I sit here and think about a spouse. What do you tell that person? How do you create a new vision for them? How do you speak about that with a child who's lost a parent, or a parent who's lost a child, or simply a person that's lost a best friend? There's so many different visions out there, but I think that's one of the first things that I think is the most aggravating about grief is there's no roadmap. There is no point A to point B. It is a nasty process sometimes getting to a better place.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you've heard sort of the scenarios. I certainly didn't make it up, right? That that up into the time of our loss, right, we have what we consider to be our chapters of our life, right? And you can think of every year of your life as being a chapter. And there's a very marked delineation at the point of loss where you have your life before your loss and then you have your life after. And what I try to remind my clients of is that there are more chapters. Like, you are still here. It's more about, grief is about your life, the life that you have, the one that you have to live, rather than the death of the person that you've lost. So, depending on what your religious beliefs are, right, I think it helps if you believe in an afterlife and you say, okay, they're in heaven, like they're good. Then it makes it a lot easier to go, okay, so my job then is just to figure out, how do I keep on living,
Mm.
and recognize that there are more chapters, and those chapters right now from today forward are pretty much blank. And you have, and again, going back to control, you have more control. And so being able to say, what are the things that I want to put in those chapters? And sometimes it's even easier to start with, these are the things I don't want moving forward, because grief will change you. And you're like, I'm not going to tolerate that. Am I allowed to say my bullshit meter really, really changed when I lost my son? As I'm like, I'm not tolerating this. Like, if this is not, I'm not putting this into my life, right? So you can adjust that and you can say, okay, but what do I want, right? What are the relationships that I want to build? Like, these three relationships are going to disappear, like, because you lose people when you grieve. But what that does is it opens up the possibility for new relationships. And where are the new relationships that can come in and that can be really helpful and hopeful and give you new perspectives? And so all of those chapters are yet to be written, and you're not dead yet yourself. So let's make those good. Right? And what does that look like? And so I really try to focus on inspiring people to look that way and to move forward. And you carry the love that you have with your loved one, all the learnings, whether it's a spouse, you carry your spouse into the future, and everything that you've learned from them, they've made you who you are, right? It's not like they suddenly poof are gone. I mean, physically, yes. But the
That,
rest, they are still very much alive within you and in your heart.
yeah. That'd be a good book title. You're not dead yet, right?
So I work with a lot of seniors right now, and I was just at a senior event, and my clients who also happened to be there were like, you need to do a talk, you need to do a talk. And the woman came over because they had told her, you need to have Catherine talk. And she said, well, we try to keep stuff like positive here. We don't really want to be negative. And I said, okay, well, if you want to go there, I said, how about, and again, this is seniors, right? Over 55. I said, how about if we start with, you're not dead yet? I
Yeah.
said, because that is all, that is what this is about. That is what grief healing is, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you speak about chapters, and that's something else I speak to with my clients. I've had several who have lost spouses that come in and they're like, I don't want to start over. I said, starting over is like reading a whole new book, right? This is just a different chapter. In certain chapters in books, you have characters who don't make it over to the next chapter, or maybe it's only their memory that is crossed over into the next chapter or chapters, right? That's not a bad thing when we're reading books, and it's the same thing in life. We don't want to just close a book and say, "Well, that's over, and I've got to start something new." No, that person will continue forward into different chapters. Now, you think about a spouse who has lost someone early on, and I've had several of those on this podcast. So it's not them closing a new book and opening up a new book. They're still going to miss that spouse, right? Even if they have a new marriage. And I've actually had one person that I can think of come on who was married again when they were speaking about this previous loss. And
Mhm.
it's okay to speak about those things, right? It's people's names. That's how we continue to remember. That's how we continue to express that love that we spoke about earlier, right? It continues on. Yes, it takes on different forms,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that we have to lose something. Don't close the book. Just start a new chapter. And it may be one of those chapters like, I never wanted to write this. I 100% agree. I
Mm.
100% agree. There's a lot of chapters in life that I didn't want to write, but we were talking about the therapy thing. And when I spoke to a previous therapist I had several years ago, I told her the four worst things that have happened to me in life, one of them being the death of my best friend. And I said, but you know what? I like me. I like who I am. And I started crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just told her the four worst things that's ever happened to me. And I'm stating, I like me. And what I understood in that moment was if I changed any of that, any of the hard stuff, I may not be the guy that I like.
100%. 100%. Well, yeah, so there's so much there. So I'm on actually my third couple of people who have found themselves through my grief business. And so I'm very excited about that. But I think what's important to talk about, especially when we lose a spouse or even, a parent or a child, right? There's this loss of identity. Like I remember the first Mother's Day after my son died, thinking to myself, well, do I celebrate? Like, am I a mother? This identity shift is very profound. And people who have been married 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they are used to having that spouse around and they rely on that spouse to do things. And all of a sudden, there's this big void. And they say, I don't know who I am without this person because,
Hmm.
again, they're so connected. And so it's a journey. I've had people describe it as they saying, like, I know me again. I've discovered me. I had one couple, they were just at retirement age, and it's so hard when like people work their entire careers. I have several people where they've retired and the husband has dropped dead of a heart attack.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
terrible. But I have one client that's exactly what happened to them. They had all these plans to go and travel. They had, the places mapped out where they were going to go and what they were going to do. And I just said to her, I said, well, why don't you go to those places? And this woman embarked on a 3-month journey. She just rented Airbnbs and she went to all these places. She took his ashes with him. She took pictures. She did it in some ways for him. But what she didn't know was she was doing it for herself. And she said, I found out who I am. Like I can do things without him. And she's like, I'm so proud of me. And
Hmm.
watching that unfold is one of the most rewarding things really in what I do is seeing that happen. And it takes a minute. It doesn't happen super quickly, but it happens. Or
Yeah.
having someone find someone else, right? I find that I love working with men. I work primarily with women, but I love working with men. And men like to be alone less after losing a spouse, I think, than women do. And so I remember telling one gentleman, I'm like, well, you just need to find someone who has also lost a spouse, and you guys need to get together. And sure enough, like he did, and they are. And so, there's that level of understanding too. And sometimes that can work really well. So I don't know. Maybe I'll start a widower matchmaking service, right?
Hey,
Just
I'm
to,
sure that somebody out there would be on that really quickly.
I bet so. I mean, maybe it already exists. I don't know.
Well, like you said, I think a lot of people are looking for commonalities, things that we share. And of course, that sounds like a twisted thing that you would want to share with someone. But like you said, there's a level of understanding. You know, yeah, if okay, you had mentioned California earlier in our conversation before we punched record, and it's like I've never been to California. I can go off of your words. You can tell me how beautiful it is, all the great things about California, and it's like, okay, in my mind, I understand that. Until I experience it, I'm not going to have that level of understanding that's required for me to know exactly what you're talking about. And of course, even then, we're going to have different visions, right? Whenever I used to do a lot of couples counseling, which I've tried to steer away from lately, it's like wrangling cats, I always state, whenever you have two people in the room that you're trying to counsel at the same time. But I'll pick an object. And of course, uh, for those that can't see me, and you can, I've got a guitar back behind here. And we can state, if there were a couple in this room, I could state we can agree what this is, what its purpose is, all that, but we all see it from different views, right? It's so I think that would be just like the dating service that, um, okay, you've got two people who have lost someone, and I think that's a great thing that they can see, oh, wow, this is what it's like. So maybe they value relationship, marriage, whatever it is, they value that a little bit differently than someone who's never lost a spouse.
Mhm.
But still, the spouses they lost are completely separate, right? They're individualized. I always state too that like you can take the loss of a parent and you've got two siblings who lose the same parent. The relationship with that parent is different for both siblings. So that's why I hate when people state, I know exactly how you feel, right?
I
In the
cringe when
grief
I hear
world,
that.
it is
Yeah.
like, yeah, we throw up the cross, right? Like, get away from me. That's
Mhm.
horrible words. Um, and again, why, if we all grieve, do we keep stating these things that bring no value to conversation? I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't.
Mhm. Well, and I think that's why, we were talking about therapy and working one on one, but I see a lot of value. Primarily what I do now is getting people together in community
Mm.
because I think it's really healing to be able to hear these things, right? We talk about, well, tell me what's the worst thing that someone has said to you, right? And being able to, we are creatures of comparison, right? So to be able to compare our grief journey, our emotions, the way we look at things with other people, can be really healing of itself. And like you said, that shift in perspective, right? We
Yes.
have sometimes our beliefs. I was listening to something and they said sometimes you shouldn't believe your thoughts. Your thoughts are unreliable, right? And so being able to hear from someone else and be able to understand their perspective on things, which can be very different from yours, can really help you kind of unravel. Well, wait a minute. Do I actually believe what I think I believe? Or
Mm.
is there another way of looking at the situation or the scenario or my grief or loss? And I think that that's a good opportunity for healing.
I usually state that being stuck, I think, is the worst human condition, and I still believe that. Going forward's obvious. Going backwards is sometimes necessary to pick up some things that we have lost along the way. Um, but I think being stuck is one of the worst things that a human can deal with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I speak to that. And a lot of people come to me and they say, I am stuck. I am stuck in grief and I can't move forward, right? That's where
Hmm.
my move forward tagline really came from. And you look at, Tony Robbins talks all the time about the need for progress. It doesn't matter how much progress you're making. It can be slow, it can be incremental. But if you are not making progress, you are basically unhappy. And that being stuck, I've had clients say, like, I feel like my feet are stuck in concrete. I feel like I can't get past this anger. I can't let go of this guilt. I don't know how to sit with the intensity of the pain that I'm feeling.
Mm.
And these are these are situations where people feel stuck. And so that is usually the other good thing I like about the concept of being stuck is it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes being stuck is more uncomfortable than actually moving forward. And it's the thing that will force people maybe to consider therapy, right? Or consider, like, most people find me because they go to YouTube. We go to YouTube for everything these days, right? So people go to YouTube and they say stuck in grief and my face pops up, right? As one of the first things. And so they're looking for something. And when people get to that point where they're like, I'm looking for something, I feel stuck, if they can identify, well, tell me where you're stuck. What do you think is stuck for you? Well, then I know I can help them.
Well, you just absolutely crushed this segue into my favorite Tony Robbins quote, okay? And this was not planned at all, but awesome. Thank you. But he's got a quote that says, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, right? It literally, it's the only quote that I can tell you of Tony Robbins, but I like a lot of his stuff, but that is one that has always stuck with me. Um, so whenever I was kind of leading us about being stuck, there was something that you said before that it kind of got my mind going in this direction, but it's the fact that I think the other horrible human quality is when people are unwilling to be challenged, right? If I
Mhm.
challenge you to do something different or to live a different way, and you say, no, not going to do it. So now you're choosing, right? Another word we've used already. Now you're choosing to stay stuck, right? So I feel like one of the biggest things that we need in grief are people who are willing to challenge us in a loving way, right? There's a lot of hurtful things out there, but I think we need to be challenged in a way that says, um, I see great things in you, and I know you don't see that for yourself, but let's paint this future picture together. Like, where do you want to be a month from now, a year from now, 3 to 5 years from now? Knowing that, I've used this example several times on this podcast. If I would have asked you your 3 to 5 year goal 5 years ago, you would have got it wrong. COVID threw us all off, right? Life was going great, and then it's like, oh wow, here's this new thing. We all have landed in a different place than what we envisioned 5 years ago. Guarantee it.
Yes.
So, how in the world do you feel like grief could be any different? You didn't ask for that any more than you asked for COVID, right?
Mhm.
So, how do we do that? And I think that just kind of leads us into a place of how do we keep encouraging others? And Catherine, I know you've got this grief inspired thing that you do. Um, how are you challenging others?
Hmm. Well, that's why I call myself a grief coach, right? Because the whole coaching is giving people tools, but then encouraging them to use them, right? And then giving a little push when they don't. So, for example, um, someone who lost a spouse that I was working with, she was caring for her husband. She had cared for her husband for years. It was her whole life. He passed away, and suddenly her calendar was empty.
Mm,
And she's like, I don't know what to do with myself. She's like, I'm kind of lonely. She's like, but I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want to do. Right. And so we sat down and we started talking, and I'm like, okay, well, what are some options? Like, you're a senior. She's like, well, there's a senior center that I found, and there's like yoga at the library, and I could volunteer somewhere. Right. And so she came up with the ideas, but then she's like, but I'm scared. I don't want to do that. Right. Doing
mm,
anything new, is scary, and there's a lot of fear in it, right? But the definition of courage. So one of my core values is courage, and the definition of courage is feeling the fear and moving through it anyways, right? And so I said, okay, well, what do we need to do to get you to go to that class? Do you need me to call you and give you a pep talk right before you go? And I want you to go, and then I want you to call me like as soon as you do go. And little by little, with my little prodding, like, did you go today? Like, are you going to go tomorrow? Like, eventually I can push just enough that they will go. And then they
mm.
come back and say, wow, I actually really enjoyed that. Like, I met somebody new. I know that that's really good for me. And that won't always happen, which I think is also really useful information, right? So it's this concept of just try it on. Try it on as if it were new clothing or a pair of shoes. If they fit and they feel comfortable, we'll keep them and keep wearing them. If you try it on and you're like, this is not for me, great. Super useful information. Let's try something different. And eventually you will find something that works for you.
Yeah, I like the word courage, Catherine, which Comes from a French word called coeur, Coeur, I believe, which says to take heart, right?
Mhm.
I like that. I think I found that in an
That's
Alan
a Brene
Wolfelt book.
Brownism.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I
she
read
talks
that
a lot
in
about that.
Alan Wolfelt book or something. But yeah, it's that's great, that you're taking heart of this new thing. And I love the analogy that you're stating with the pair of shoes.
Mm.
That makes very good sense. I'm one of those people that I know I have shoes that are close to 25 years old. They're comfortable. They still look good. I take good
Mhm.
care of them. I don't want to get rid of them. But it doesn't mean that I can't put on a new pair. And if they feel good, why can't I wear those as well? Right? So excellent, excellent analogy.
Yeah, and it's a good, and that's why I like the coaching term, because I think that's what a coach can do for you. Sometimes we are so close to the things that maybe stop us or hold us back that we can't see them, right? Having a coach or a therapist that's sort of outside of you that can see you and can see your patterns and your habits and the things that you kind of consistently do that you say you don't want that keep happening. A coach can hold up the mirror and say, okay, like, do you want this or not? Because you keep saying you do, but your actions are telling me otherwise. So what's going on there, right? And then you dive into, well, what's stopping you? What does that look like? Like,
Mhm.
let's unravel that. It's like a ball of yarn, right? You got to unravel it. Here's the first piece. And once you get one out, you're like, oh, okay, it's a little bit looser now. We can figure this out. So I think the coaching and that pushing, and again, you have to have that trust, right? We develop that sense of trust, and they know. And what's super unique, in we meet in my community twice a week,
Mm,
live on a Zoom, and we interact and we talk. And what's incredible is when my clients will use my techniques back on me, and
nice.
they'll say, well, here's what you said, right? You said I should be doing this, or, and you have to remind yourself it's a practice, right? I even need to remind myself, right? That I have more control than I think I do. Okay, hang on a second, right? Another grief inspired mantra that I have is like, the answers to your life are within you. We spend so much time sometimes looking for other people to fix us or to give
Yeah.
us the answer or the quick fix or the drug or the whatever. But sometimes you just have to get quiet and you have to realize that the answers that you're looking for, and there's a lot of answers that you might not ever find when it comes to grief, but finding how you're going to reconcile that happens within. It happens deep within. And sometimes you have to get quiet and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, there's two things that are popping to my mind. Number one, the one thing a coach can't do for you is hit the ball, right? Like I can direct you on how to do it, but I can't
Exactly.
play the game for you.
Yep.
The other idea that I'm thinking about, and we always talk about grief is hard work, right? One of the movies that always pops to my mind when I think about this is the newer version of Karate Kid with Jalen Smith. I actually liked it really well. Um, but Jackie Chan, he's like, everything is kung fu. And you find out kung fu means hard work, right? But
Mm.
this whole time he's teaching him, pick up the jacket, put the jacket down, blah, blah, blah. And when you see this kid's eyes light up when he really understands that, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been learning how to do kung fu. But it was through these small practices that kind of helped me along the way. Um, I don't know. It's just a brilliant piece in this movie, and it's like I think that's what we do as therapists and coaches is we teach these little things, and when you're doing them, you're like, I don't want to journal, right? I don't want to call a friend whenever I feel lonely. I don't want to do these things, but one day when it all hits, it's like, oh my gosh, I know what Catherine was telling me this whole time, right?
Exactly.
I feel so good. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is the hard work of grief counseling, right?
It is, it is. And so, that's the thing. You talk about, I'll have somebody who came to me, she's like, I have so much anxiety. I have so much anxiety. And I said, Okay, did you do? I have a 478 breathing technique that I learned from Andrew Weil. That like, have you done the 478 breathing technique that I taught you? No. Like, great. Have you journaled about what's causing your anxiety? Well, no. Like, have you done any of the things that I've told you? I said, you have to put some trust in me that these things are going to help you, that you need to do the work. So please do those. And then come back and let's talk. And it's sort of a little bit of a tough love, but you can't complain and not be willing to do some of the work, right? You have to be able to do the push-ups if you want to get stronger.
I've been accused of being passive aggressive a lot, and I think there are ways that I am. But whenever I challenge somebody like that, okay, I've given you five different things. What of those five things did you do this past week? And they say, I didn't do any. And then I would be like, I wonder why you're stuck right now. Let's walk through this, right?
That is
And
passive aggressive.
obviously my clients know me well enough to know that that's just me. And but yeah, you're right. But when you look at it, it's like, okay,
Well, the next
now
question
that
is
you
why?
that's
Why are you
exactly
not
it.
wanting to help yourself?
That's it. So next week when you come in, do you want to be here or do you want to just show up to the ball game, right? Put on the uniform. Small steps. I'm not asking you to hit a home run. I'm not asking you to shoot the winning basket. All I'm trying to do is state show up, right? One small thing.
Yeah, and grieving needs to be an active process. You need to, it's not grief is a noun, but grieving is a verb. And so it needs to be active so that if you are not actively doing something, learning a tool, learning about grief, reading a book, listening to a podcast, seeing a therapist, talking to a coach, if you are not doing those things, you likely will stay stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, tell me a little bit more about how to get in touch with you, how listeners can reach out for your services, and just a little bit about what you provide and what you can do for them.
Absolutely. So you can find me at griefinspiredme.com, or you can just search Grief Inspired on all of the platforms. All of my YouTube videos are free of charge. There's about 600 of them there. So that's usually where people find me. You can decide whether or not you like me there before you reach out. So that's a little bit of a way to get to know me a little bit. I encourage people to go through, I have a 10-week course that really gives you some of the mindset, some of the grief education, the personal development tools to get an action about that you can choose. So I encourage people to do that first. And then I have an online community that's a membership paid community that you can come into after the course. I mean, people come in sometimes before the course, but I recommend the course first and then come into the community to have ongoing support, to continue to learn more skills, more strategies, more tools, and to continue to interact in community. Because again, it's doing that work, being engaged. I put in there every week a weekly coaching video. It's usually just short. To give you an example, this week I said it was a 4-minute video. Is what you're doing in your life every day, is it helping you or hurting you? What are
Hmm.
the things that are helping you? What are the things that are hurting you? So that's just an example. And then, yeah, and I work one-on-one as well. So, but it's all about moving forward. It's being inspired to do something to help yourself. And again, and then if you take grief inspired one step further, it's what do you want to put out into the world because of who you are now, after you've grieved, after you've gone through the healing process, because people find that they then want to do something positive in the world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I notice is that most people who have been affected by grief, um, even if they have no professional background or desire to do this professionally, whether it's grief coach, therapist, whatever, I find that they're still very therapeutic to those who have lost others, and it is kind of a learning process and figuring out how we can help the next person because I guarantee you there will be a next person. There'll be somebody that needs to hear your story. right?
Well, and that's what I want. That's why I love what you do and getting the grief conversation going. None of us are getting out of here alive. And the more we can educate ourselves and get okay with our own grief, the more we can help everybody else. And it just, it flourishes from there. And so that's what I want is to people to be able to talk about grief and to know how to support other people and not say the terrible things,
Right,
right?
right.
And really be there to give people the opportunity to heal and to grow because that's what we're all doing. We will grow for as long as we're alive.
That's
And
it.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, any final words for us here as we close out? Any words of wisdom or anything else you think we forgot?
Well, so one of the things that when I interview clients on my webpage, I always ask them the same question, right? And I said, what would you say to someone who is grieving? This particular person was grieving a spouse. And what she said was so epic. She said, you have to get your grief out.
Mm,
However you do that, you have to get your grief out. Don't keep it within. Don't grieve alone. I had t-shirts made that say to get your grief out because it was so powerful.
mm.
So yeah, like don't do this alone. You absolutely can. But what I always say is I don't recommend it. So get the support that you need. You can, I do believe that you can grieve more quickly, that you can grieve more efficiently, and that you can be a better person for it if you let it.
Yeah. Catherine, thanks for joining me. And you're always welcome back. And I appreciate the conversation. And I wish you well in all of your grief things out in life. And most importantly, I just thank you for continuing the love of your son and sharing that with others.
Thank you so much. He is the reason why we're all here.
There you go. Well, listeners, thanks again for joining in to the Grief Observe podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this. Like and share if you did. And I appreciate all the support from uh, all the listeners that tune in each time that we have a podcast. So thanks again to Catherine, and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.